Kia ora. My name's Kristian de Pont and I'm with Good Sorts Property Services, and this is podcast Epi 2, named still TBD. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, but I'm joined by my guest Perry Hoffman at Abstract AI.
Excited to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. I thought it might be good just to kind of kick off and talk about how we got to know each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously brother to the infamous Reese Hoffman over at Dayton Power.
Yep.
But tell us a little bit about Perry Hoffman.
Yeah. So, brother to Reese, Dayton Power here in Kelowna. My background is all in software engineering. I started off as actually a designer in design school. And then I kind of switched and started learning about programming, really like building things. And that's what kind of launched me into a career into software engineering specifically. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I kind of went on to become a software development manager, led a couple teams most recently at Stripe. Mm-hmm. I've been tinkering a lot with AI recently. Mm-hmm. And then I started Abstract Digital, and here we are.
Yeah. And quite a different pathway too, hey, but between your brother and the trades, hey? And
totally.
What was it like growing up with the two boys at home?
It's actually interesting because I've thought about this quite a bit and I've talked to him about it. And, through high school, we had really different interests. And then as we've gotten older into adulthood, we kind of realize how much we actually have in common. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it comes back to business, entrepreneurship, what have you, mm-hmm. right? So we've been able to bond a lot over the last, I would say, decade or so. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a time in high school where we were very different people. And I think we are, to a point. Yeah. But we're more similar than I think we realize as well.
I reflect on that in my own experience too. It's like my brother and I think we were growing up and had kind of different interests, different life stages and stuff like that. Yeah. But, you have kids and that's something that you have commonality in. And my brother's a business owner as well, so there's some commonality there. So it's funny as you kind of get into your adult years and how you kind of reconnect with your siblings.
Exactly. And I mean, our interests couldn't be more different. I mean, he's in blue collar, like a lot of the trades, loves trucks. I was very different than that, right? I was always tinkering with computers. Not to say he's not technical, but yeah.
Yeah. And how was that stepping off point for you in that sort of decision? Stripe, obviously, massive company. Yeah. Lots of dollars behind them, and I'm sure a very attractive comp plan,
totally,
and package. That's a tough thing to break away from. What was that moment for you to step out?
A lot of time went into that decision, right? A lot of back and forth, a lot of thinking, and it kind of brings me back to my experience. I've always worked with startups. Right. And I've really enjoyed kind of the scrappy nature of figuring things out, building. And Stripe, even though they were 8,000 people when I left, they still considered themselves a startup. Mm-hmm. Right. But it kind of got to a point where I felt like I had put in my time, I had learned what I had learned, and I wasn't kind of on that same growth trajectory that I wanted to be at. Right. And I've always been wanting to start my own thing. Right. And it just felt like the right time.
Yeah.
So took the plunge.
Yeah, took the plunge. and I mean, I think when the challenge falls away from whatever you're working on, whether you're in business or if you're working sort of entrepreneurial, let's say, for another company, and if the challenge starts to kind of, or the learning stops. Yeah. That's a point of reflection, hey, and to make a change. But
100%.
I'm sure those golden handcuffs were pretty hard to walk away from.
They were pretty golden.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. And so stepping off into that, tell us a little bit about what you are doing today.
Yeah. So at Stripe, I learned a lot, right? I was a manager there for multiple teams. So when you're a manager, you're expected to be very technical, but you're not actually in the weeds building, right? And I think part of me missed that. And I think kind of going into starting Abstract Digital, I'm kind of finding a position where I can work with SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, right? Bring that sort of technical expertise, hopefully be somebody businesses can trust, and then not only, help grow Abstract Digital, but help them grow their businesses and achieve whatever goals they're looking to achieve. And that's through things like workflow automations, AI automations, you know what I mean? Like helping them pick the right tech stack, just being that sort of skill set to come in when they might not have that in-house, or they might not have the time either, right?
I think you're stepping off into entrepreneurship at a really interesting time too, because I mean, with the chats, the Claudes, the Geminis, there's so much of this going on. I think it's creating a ton of confusion, maybe a bit of anxiety for a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
And I was at a catch up with a couple of guys this morning, and there's this comparison that almost happens too, right? When you're talking to your peers that are also business owners, there's a sort of tendency to compare where you're up to with your adoption of some of these tools. I think that creates anxiety for others. There's sort of this comparison of, gosh, I've got this agent or whatever doing X, Y, Z for me and stuff like that. And, that kind of natural inflection point goes, oh, shit, am I behind the 8-ball here?
Right.
So you're stepping into it at a really interesting time. And I think kind of where I had that moment, and for full clarity, Perry, you jumped on as our sort of fractional CTO here at Good Sorts.
Super excited.
Yeah, it's for me that was a recognition that it's important. It's an area of our business that I want to pour more time into, but I don't necessarily have the skill sets or time to be able to commit to learning something, because the learning curve is steep.
The learning curve's steep and it's moving a mile a minute, right? So and I don't recommend anybody kind of stay on the bleeding edge unless you're really, you have the time and you can dedicate that time to learning, because things are changing so fast. You could be using something one day and it's just not going to be relevant, a week or two from now. It's like that fast, right? So there's that. You could be burning time unnecessarily, especially if you're a busy business owner. I mean, you have 100 things on the to-do list anyways, right? Where this fits, you have to be very strategic about, right? So that's where I think partnering up with somebody who's spending the time to kind of understand and figure out and sift through what's kind of the thing to focus on, what can we ignore for now, and what's going to work best for your specific needs in your business, I think is something that's super powerful.
What do you say to the business owner that thinks that it's a little bit too early, that maybe the technology is getting there, but it's not quite there yet?
Yeah.
What do you say to that person, particularly like in our business, we're looking at wholesale improvements. We're looking at some of the SaaS products that we use today, and it's like, gosh, could we reinvent this and throw this out and start something else? I think with the rate of change, that's kind of a scary prospect of committing and painting yourself in a corner, potentially with a decision that comes to haunt you down the track when you're actually getting into it a little bit. With the rate of change, it's hard to be I guess commit to a certain pathway. But what do you say to those business owners that are saying, I'm just going to hold off and kind of wait and see?
Are you talking specifically about AI?
Yeah.
So I don't know, a couple things there. It's pretty evident that AI is here to stay, right? Being on the bleeding edge can be, a bit of a time sink, but not adopting it at all, or at least starting to get familiar with it, is probably not the best thing either, because you don't want to be left behind. There are so many positives that come along with using some of this technology. That once you realize it, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, why wasn't I doing this sooner? Right? That being said, though, you need to make sure that the foundation for kind of the other technology that you have running the business is on solid foundations. Like, you don't want to just jump into AI because it's a new exciting thing, right? Especially if you have some kind of like fundamental issues with the business. AI might not be able to come in and help the way you need it to, right? For those types of businesses or people in that situation, I would definitely suggest kind of starting with the basics, making sure that that's really sound, and then starting to apply AI and add that on top of a stronger foundation. I think will produce much better results.
It resonates a lot. The foundation. I think you're always working on the foundation of your business, right? You're trying to build more resources for the team, more opportunities to learn, and doing that in a structured way. But the advice here is, if you don't have the basics in place, don't try and add another layer of complexity by, sort of bringing in tools without actually understanding the problem you're trying to solve first.
Exactly. And I think it can really bog you down. It can bog the team down, right? If there's a lot of manual process, let's say hypothetically using some sort of tool for operations or whatever the team uses every day, right? Adding on an AI workflow on top of that, could actually make things slower, because not only does the team have to adopt it, there could be bugs with it, right? Sometimes the output isn't ideal if the data that you put in isn't really solid, right? So it kind of gets away from you in that sense. Yeah, definitely be careful with that.
And talking to a lot of other business owners that have varying levels of sophistication with some of this stuff, I think by and large, the folks that I'm chatting to are kind of at that level one, LLM user that maybe they're using it to craft an email that just to put a little bit more polish on it. Or maybe, using it to manipulate some numbers and that sort of stuff. But, the folks that have some curiosity about cracking into that sort of next level, where do you suggest they start? What are I guess the functions or areas in the business that you think most business owners or small business owners are going to see the biggest gains if they were to pour their time into a function? Maybe it's marketing. That you see the biggest, I guess, potential to make some significant strides and actually feel like they're getting a quick return.
Totally. Well, so for folks that haven't even started using AI, I think what you described is perfect, right? Like start using the chats, right? Start getting familiar with it, get it to help you write some emails, maybe like check your grammar. That feels like a really good place to dip your toes into. But when you're talking about kind of the next level after that, it really does depend on the business and, like what the priorities of the business are. You called out marketing. I think that could be a really good one if you did have a marketing initiative, right? You wanted more content. You wanted to improve SEO, right? You could look at different tooling or look at some of the products out there like Claude, like ChatGPT, what have you, to help you kind of generate content, audit content, edit content, right? And when doing that, you're kind of gonna have to learn how skills work, how agents work, some of these different concepts, right? What context is when you're using AI, right? And those are kind of the, I guess, areas of just like the discipline that you're gonna want to get familiar with, especially as you add complexity, because they're really fundamental, I guess, topics.
And there is this, I think, squirrel kind of thing that most founders have, where they're looking at the new shiny objects, and focus is really the challenge, right? Is creating focus in your business.
And it's exciting. I mean, like, you know what I mean? This technology is super exciting. I can see why a lot of business owners, myself included, we want to try these things and, get it working as soon as possible, right? You just gotta, you gotta just do that with a lot of intention.
How do you sort of quell the fears of your team? So, I'm an owner. I'm very into some of the stuff that's coming out, and I'm very interested in it. I don't necessarily have the skill set or the time to become an expert in that topic myself. But what do you say to the team members that exist in those organizations where you've got a founder that's very interested in it, and then there's some sort of hesitation or perhaps some reluctance or resistance to looking at adopting these things, because that natural thought is this going to take my job, or am I training a tool to basically or eventually replace me? What would you say to
is there a real world
employees?
example here?
This is not a real example. I think generally speaking, most folks are on board.
Totally.
Yeah, I think it can be unsettling, right? And change is unsettling for a lot of people, particularly in these small businesses that maybe have a way of doing things and have done it that way for many years. What do you say to the employee that is now getting this dropped on their desk and expected to adopt some of these tools?
Yeah, it's scary, and I get it. I mean, there's probably a lot of folks who feel like everything, like my role is at stake here, right? Like, is AI going to come in and take our jobs, right? And I personally don't think that's the case. I think the job is going to change with AI. right? The roles and responsibilities may change with AI, but if you see it more as an assistant or a tool that's going to help you accelerate in your role, it kind of changes the position of what this is versus the scary thing that I don't understand and I'm just going to be made redundant, right? So part of it's probably kind of demonstrating the value, but in a way where it's like, how can this help you in your role and kind of like 2x, 5x, 10x what you're able to do, right? And maybe even evolve the role to not just be single function, but also now take on more responsibility, right? I would hope that's empowering to folks on the team, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, it's a sort of a tool is sort of to, I guess it's a lever that they can pull to kind of improve their productivity.
Yeah.
What do you think the skills? What skills should founders and leaders be working on with their team to get them in a place where they're ready to adopt some of these tools more openly? Like what sort of soft skills as well as, I guess, more technical or hard skills do folks need to start thinking about to make them a bulletproof employee that founders really value and can actually be champions for some of this stuff?
So I think one of the biggest things to think about is kind of the data, right? And are the processes and the responsibilities documented? Because AI is a great tool. I think it's really important for folks to realize that AI doesn't really understand you as like a person trying to teach it something, right? It's just a really good pattern matcher. Okay. And it's trained on just this vast amounts of data on the internet, right? So it can feel like it can understand you and give you a good answer, right? But really it's just pattern matching based off a bunch of training it's gotten in the past. How that ties to data is if you have a role or a set of instructions or a standard operating practice that you have documented, well, now you can actually share that with AI and you can get better results, right? That coupled with really good data in, say, your CRM or your customer database or what have you, right? You can kind of pair those things together. And then that's a really big unlock to what AI is capable of versus kind of this high-level prompting, very generic, hey, I need to do this thing, right? It doesn't really know, so it'll give you the best answer that it can, right? The more specific that you can be, the better the results you're going to get. And I think that's probably like the best tip I can give folks that are just starting to use AI to like how they can do better is really just to be more specific. And I mean really specific, because the more specific you can be, the better the results you're going to get overall.
And doing that, I guess, earlier in that chat thread as well. Hey, so you did right. I'm thinking of scenarios in my own work where I'm no, you've got it all wrong. You need it back. You didn't read my. You're not understanding something here.
Totally.
So it's all about, I guess, understanding. If you can sort of look behind the curtain and actually understand how the tool works, how you prompt is really where the magic can happen.
Exactly.
In terms of risk, a lot of these tools now can interface and interact with your computer directly.
Yes.
That's obviously fraught with risk. If it's sort of this unfettered access to your tools and your software, potentially it's your connected to your finance, your banking, etc. So there's a real risk in there. I'm probably the worst example of someone that's being safe with this, right?
Plug it into everything.
It's plugged into everything, right? So I selfishly, I'm asking this question for myself to sort of mitigate risk. But I think, the insurance industry is going to be a really interesting one to watch as well.
Absolutely.
And how that responds to cybersecurity type challenges and risks.
Yep.
What do you think business owners need to be mindful of when they are connecting some of these tools?
Definitely be mindful of what you're connecting them to, right? And what the goal of connecting them to, say, a financial institution is, right? A lot of these products, I'll use Claude as an example. They're trying to build in the safeguards to protect you as a user, but it can only do so much, right? And it's really your responsibility to just be thoughtful about how you're using AI and what you're letting it do. AI gets stuff wrong, right? Like it hallucinates. We know that it happens all the time. And if you give it, say I'm coding, something, a big project or what have you, and I give it kind of unfederated access to everything, and I say, hey, you can do anything, you can write code, but you can also delete code, right? Giving access to be able to like delete something is kind of scary because it might do something that you weren't expecting. And then all of a sudden you're in a position where you can't recover that, right? That's where I would be concerned with, kind of access to your personal computer and just like file access. But I would be like more on the business side. I would be hesitant to, especially when you're working with partners, that's where I actually think it gets a little bit scarier. And you want to be careful to make sure that they understand security. They understand what they're doing with, say, your API keys, right? They're not just posting it publicly to the internet. You know what I mean? It might not be the AI product itself because, they say that they don't actually store any of your information or anything like that, but they have very clear prompts and guidance to say, do not share your private keys in the chat window. You know what I mean? Don't do this, right? They're really trying to tell you not to, because that's how it ends up, in a bad actor's hands. A bad actor being like a hacker or somebody trying to do malicious things. So that's where, AI is one thing, but also the folks that you work with, you want to just make sure that they're very diligent and they're thinking about security and they have your best interest in mind as well, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fear that I mean that's a fear I have.
Totally.
I want to unlock some of that stuff so that folks can start playing with the tools and start to kind of ideate and think about how they could use that tool to remove friction or remove some of the laborious tasks or things that are repetitive that they can get onto more meaningful and creative or deep work or critical thinking, etc. about, I guess, to create space for them to kind of think a little bit more critically about stuff. But that's tempered with, the risk aspect of client information getting shared and or discussions around clients happening with some of these tools, and I think there's potential risk in that you need to have a bit of a threshold on what you're prepared to
absolutely
input into the tool.
And I think just thinking about that as a business owner, you're probably like 50% of the way there, right? Because then you can start to talk to folks and think about access control, right? Think about permissions that you're giving to AI, because you could connect it, or you could, even if it's not AI, it's just some sort of like software program, right? You could connect it with one of the tools that you use for client information, right? But you could only give it limited access. So folks on the team can only retrieve this type of data and not retrieve this other type of data, right? Just putting those types of controls in place, I think, are really important. And that's where, if you can find somebody to partner with, right, and come up with a strategy for these things, it can really ease your mind, right? And save you a lot of time and headache, ideally, if anything does go awry.
What do you think? If I'm a team member working for an organization and I've got a lot of interest in this, but I don't really know where to start. Where are some good resources for folks to be kind of looking at to kind of cut through the noise? I'm a sucker for TikTok, and I sit there and I doom scroll. I need to get rid of it. But you kind of, some of that sort of comparison happens on that too, right? It's like, these guys are way further ahead than I am when you're sort of getting fed these quick dopamine hits of like, look what I've done with Claude. Where can someone go cut through the noise, without engaging a period abstract, to just get the fundamentals, to give them that sort of broad level or foundational understanding of how to work with some of these tools? Where is the best source for them to get that information right now?
That's a good question. I feel like there's so much content out there right now.
We're part of the problem.
We're part of the problem. Yeah, exactly. TikTok. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times with some of those videos, they don't describe the amount of work that went into that or the headaches that they're getting, behind the scenes when something happens, there's a bug, what have you, right? They're kind of only showing you the hype part of it, right? There's usually more to it, just to be cognizant of. But in terms of where to learn about this sort of thing, I think a lot of the companies that are producing these models are doing a pretty good job of generating content to teach you how. So Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, they all have kind of their own documentation, and it's all written by the people building these tools, right? And they're teaching you fundamentals as well. I think that's probably one of the best places to start, as well as you can go on YouTube. I don't have any specific names to give you, but there are definitely folks where you can get really high quality content. But at the same time, you have to be careful because there is still a lot of noise on YouTube as well.
Just sharing my own experience, I went on one of those masterclass type things, and it had a basics or fundamentals type course, and I found that the information was so rudimentary, but also already behind what's already happening out there, that it was actually kind of obsolete and redundant, the information that was in it, and the style of learning too was a little bit gates on before you move on to module B, you must pass module A, but the content you kind of have a good grasp on. So having some sort of work at your own pace, and depending on your level of understanding of some of these tools, you've got different jumping off points for a lot of different people. So like Anthropic, I know, have got really good documentation, but also in plain English, right? That's really useful
because it's for everybody, right? And I think the best way, honestly, is just learn by doing as well, right? Like, you can read about this stuff, but once you start actually interacting with these large language models, once you actually start downloading some of these tools and playing with it, I think you'll learn a ton just by doing that. And then that will kind of like give you a jumping off point to go deeper. That's where you can get into the documentation, but like, what are these skills? I want to learn more about them. And then you apply them. And a lot of this is trial and error, right? So you're doing a lot of feedback loops with AI to help it get better, to give you better answers, right? So you're going to be forced at some point to just use the thing. And it will actually do a good job of helping you understand how to use it, if that makes sense.
Totally, 100%. Shifting gears here a little bit and thinking about... like my outreach to you, I was chatting with Reese, and he says, Perry's he's out of Stripe, and he's helping me with some of my tools. And heck yes, I need to get in touch with Perry here. High trust.
I'm glad you did.
And I excited to kind of dive in more on that. And I guess from where I'm sitting, it touched on this earlier, is I've got a little bit of knowledge, but very little time. And it's not my core business to become an expert in some of this stuff.
Totally.
So bringing in the help to kind of help navigate some of this stuff was important to me. But just sort of giving a bit of context here as well, and kind of where we're at today. Good Sorts has scaled from 0 to, we've 55 employees now. And I think a lot of businesses have had that kind of growth story, and have probably done what I've done by picking some tools along the way. It's kind of that proverbial rubber band. You build systems or you select tools that kind of fit you in that moment, and you kind of do workarounds and stuff like that. And typically it's off the shelf, and you try and sort of mold it to your way of working. And kind of what happens is you get this Frankenstein of tools. The pipe drives, the Asanas, the QuickBooks Online. It's this this sort of aggregate of different tools that don't necessarily talk with one another. That creates clunkiness and friction in your business, and that's really the context for me in my business, and what Period Abstract's coming in to kind of help solve. That's one of the challenges I think small business owners have. What do you think some of the other things that you're discovering in talking with small business owners, where do you think they need the most help? Parking AI for a second, just at large with their technology, where do you think the biggest pain points are for small business owners today?
It depends on the business. I think there's so many that you could point at. But I think what you described is probably a very common case, because all the tools that you just rattled off are really good point solutions for doing a specific thing, right? And as you grow, you kind of like add something else to that stack. And then it gets to a point where the stack's working against the team, and it's, you know what I mean? Like, it used to be tailwinds, and now it's kind of this friction point for you and the rest of the folks on the team. And I feel like a lot of growing businesses run into this. I feel like even the startups that I used to work at, same thing. And we were, technology companies, right? Like, we were stitching together software the exact same way, because there really isn't one tool that will just solve everything, right? Even if you go all the way up to ERP solutions, right? You're paying $100,000 of implementation costs, and you can make it do what your business needs, but your business is, one of a kind at the end of the day. So you need to kind of figure out what are the tools that work for your business, your team at that stage, but just be mindful of what the next phase looks like, so that you're not painting yourself into a corner, to use your words, right? But there's no one good solution to all this, right?
And that's the fun of it.
That's the fun of it, 100%, right? I think as I've kind of gotten more experience in my career, I've realized how important being pragmatic is, right? So what I would tell a lot of folks as well is, it's easy to buy into the hype and say, oh, I need this tool for this, I need this other tool for this, and kind of like, you know what I mean? Just kind of accumulate versus stopping, taking a step back, kind of thinking in first principles. A lot of times a spreadsheet can actually solve a problem. You know what I mean? Or two or three, like a really well-built spreadsheet has probably gotten businesses a lot farther than a lot of people realize. Right. And that could actually be easier to manage than 5 different tools that don't talk to one another. Right. I think the moment you start seeing yourself or the team copy paste a lot, that's usually a huge red flag where it's like, we're probably outgrowing what we're doing because the manual work is just piling up.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah. Looking glass forward, if you could kind of sort of take a crystal ball and see where this is headed. I was having this chat with the crew in the morning.
Yeah.
The Asanas, the pipe drives, etc. You could vibe code some of this stuff over a weekend.
Totally.
So what do you think the future of SaaS is?
Yeah.
Do I need to be pulling out everything from the S&P 500? Where do you think that for small business owners, like, are we looking at a future where everything's custom?
Possibly. I don't know. But I think it's a really exciting time, because AI has shown us how accessible it is to build custom tooling, right? Now, vibe coding apps for your business, there's some drawbacks to that, right? And folks should be very aware that there's drawbacks to that. We can get into that in a second, because there's a lot of things on my mind there. But I think we can see a world where a lot of software becomes highly customizable, highly configurable, and more bespoke to the actual needs of the business. I don't think that a lot of these larger, kind of more established SaaS companies are going anywhere. I think what they're starting to do, or at least what I'm seeing, is they're starting to solve more problems, more adjacent problems. So you do kind of get that all in one, where you don't have the in-house skills to do something, right? But you don't want to stitch together 5 different tools anymore. Maybe you can pull 2 off the shelf, right? And they do 5 things each, right? I'm also seeing some of these SaaS companies, they're building AI in natively. So you don't need to create like your own OpenClaw instance and host it at home. And you know what I mean? Spend a month figuring that out and fixing bugs or whatever, right? You can kind of feel at ease knowing that you're still using AI, but it's in a controlled way, helping these workflows that you use already, right? And I think that's a huge unlock for small to medium-sized businesses is if you're using tools, see if they're adopting AI and helping you kind of leverage AI without you having to do all this work to figure it out, right? I think that's a pretty high leverage point for a lot of folks.
You kind of see that with a lot of the SaaS tools that are coming out, right? You have
100%.
the little, a couple of sparkly little icon, and you're hitting that, and it's. But you're right, it's designed within their framework. I think of Rippling, which is our payroll software.
Yep.
We can sort of query it in plain language of how many hours of overtime were done last week.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. So I take that point. What do you when you're thinking about like folks like me who are going through sort of this wholesale, we're reinventing the wheel here, folks. We've got this 11-piece Frankenstein software stack. But we need to make a change. What do you say to folks that are on that sort of that precipice of making a decision when the rate of change is so quick right now? How do you temper that with, obviously not wanting to paint yourself into a corner and pigeonholing yourself with a decision that you might later regret? It's any sort of change in a business is, I think business owners are, or people that are entrepreneur are kind of almost addicted to change in a lot of ways, but that's not to say that our colleagues that work alongside us are quite on board for that. It's exhausting. And I think that's 100%. Why startups have such a high churn rate, is because it's exhausting.
100%.
100%. So how do you sort of guide someone like me who's on the precipice of making a wholesale decision around consolidating tools, while also sort of making sure that the product in the future is what we want it to be, and that we're not kind of making decisions that we're going to regret later? Right.
No, that's an excellent question. I would separate out the strategy from the implementation, right? Because I think more on the implementation side, that's where folks on the team start to feel it. If you were to change all your tools all at once, folks would be like, what's going on? I don't know how to do this. Where's my information? That's where you get a lot of friction with the team. Whereas the strategy piece, which should come first, is really kind of that taking a step back, looking at the business, understanding where all these challenges are, where we're losing the most time, where we're feeling the most pain, right? Where the team's feeling the most pain, and figuring out, okay, how do we go from that to something that a business that runs more of itself automatically is kind of how I think about it, right? We want to reduce the amount of manual process. We want to reduce the amount of just like mundane, monotonous tasks as much as possible, right? And then once we kind of have the problems, we understand kind of like what we want to solve and where we want to get to. So like the goals and the vision are very clear. Then it's starting to think about, okay, well, what solutions exist in the market today? And then, going through the exercise of figuring out, does this work for our needs today? Is it extensible? Does it integrate well with other, pieces of software? Can we build custom on top of it if we need to in the future, right? Are they adopting AI? Things like this, so that you're not just picking a solution that you're going to have to throw out, a year from now, right? You want to make sure that their rate of change, they're thinking about the future, they're doing what's best for their customers too. Once you have that strategy, then it's really thinking about breaking that down into smaller pieces and then creating this sort of phased rollout where it doesn't shock the business, you know what I mean?
And the folks in it.
And the folks in it, but then you start to incrementally add value until you kind of chunk all the way through to your entire business is operating completely differently, right? And it usually starts with those bigger rocks where it's like, hey, our CRM just, the data there is not accurate, it's not working, our sales team can't use it, right? To, hey, everything's implemented, now here are the small gaps that, no tools fixed. How do we kind of like build workflows? How do we leverage AI? You know what I mean? The problems start to get a little bit smaller.
Totally. And it's quite a good jumping off point so abstract. How do you, what kind of clients do you think you pair well with, and how do you work with them? What's your process?
Yeah. So I think having worked so closely with my brother, him being in the trades, I feel like I picked up a lot of that, and it lends itself well to service businesses as well. My experience is all in fintech. So actually a lot of the finance background that just comes naturally to me as well, having spent so much time in it. So those are the types of businesses that I've been working with so far, right? But I tend to look for owners and like the team and figure out who are, forward thinking, who want to make a change, who are ambitious. That's what really excites me as well. So it's just as much finding the right teams to work with, right? In terms of process, really starts with identifying the problems, right? Like we worked together really early on. I just wanted to listen, understand what your biggest pain points were. The business best, right? Understand where you feel like the biggest friction points are, kind of see you go through different workflows, right? And explain it in your words. Meet the team. I think that's been hugely beneficial because, you only have so much time in the day. You get a lot of visibility, but folks are doing these other functions, right? And what might be the biggest problem to you might not actually be the biggest problem to them, right? And they give you a whole nother perspective. So just kind of collating all this information and getting a really good picture of where the business is, how technology layers into that, and where the friction points are from a very technical perspective, right? And then it goes into translating that into a set of kind of goals that ladder up to where the business wants to be, what you're trying to achieve, right? What GoodSorts is trying to achieve. And then we develop kind of core tenets for decision making. So it's like, hey, we want to pick software, we want to build custom, we want to create workflows, whatever we want to do, it should be based on a set of core principles that we agree on, right? That kind of put these constraints in to make sure that we're making the right decisions for the business, right?
And pedaling in the right direction.
Exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
I think that's a really useful exercise that we went through too, because us walking through our process from basically call to invoice, you get to realize how insane some of your processes are, right? And you go, God, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Why? So it's actually that process of saying it out loud. You go,
right.
Gosh, this is
right.
We really need to work on this.
It's all opportunity, though, right? It's all opportunity.
100%. Fascinating. Again, sort of changing or switching gears a little bit. I think something kind of on that same thread of entrepreneurs, folks that are working for organizations, and a lot of the young people that are coming through our school system right now are entering into a workplace that's kind of the rate of change is so quick.
Yeah,
you got folks that are sort of deciding, am I going to go? What's my career path here, and what are the opportunities in the future look like for me?
Yeah,
I was in Vancouver with my daughter. We went to the aquarium. It was a great time.
Yeah,
and we were going out for tea afterwards. Me, my wife, and my daughter, and we took a cab out to dinner. And I was having a chat with this gentleman, and he was telling me about his daughter, who he was very proud of. Was just going into the law profession.
I love it.
Just got a spot at McGill University.
Amazing.
Study law. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, gosh, by the time you get through a 4 or 5 year LLB program studying law, and you're looking for that first grad job, are those grad jobs going to exist in the same way that they do today? And what advice, I guess, would you have for folks that are looking at their jumping off points or making a decision around programs that they might be doing some coursework around?
It's such a good question, and I've been thinking about this a little bit recently. I don't know. Things are changing so fast, right? Like, who knows what it's going to be like in 5 years? There are definitely professions where AI is going to make more of an impact, good or bad, right? And then there's others where we can be fairly certain that it's probably not going to make as big of an impact, right? Construction, trades, right? AI is not going to wire your panel in your house, right? Like, it's not going to happen soon, Maybe it will in the future, but like, you know what I mean? Not right away. Whereas something like software engineering and programming, AI is really good at writing code, right? And AI is really good at writing code when it's working with somebody who understands and can, think about architecture and knows those patterns, right? So that's where the leverage is really, really high. And that's where you're seeing a lot of companies realize that. They're laying off some of their staff and saying, hey, we can do the same amount of work, we can have the same amount of output with a smaller set of programmers, right? I think that's one perspective from companies. I think another perspective from companies is, hey, I'm getting, 10x the leverage on output per engineer. Let's hire more because we're going to have even more output, right? There is definitely some of that, but I don't know where the balance is, right? And unfortunately, I think it's really challenging for folks just coming out of school in software engineering as a profession, because, who's a company going to pick? Somebody fresh out of school or the senior engineer that might have gotten, unfortunately, laid off from company A? They're probably going to get picked for company B. You know what I mean? So there's definitely going to be some careers where you probably want to be a bit more thoughtful or mindful going into it of like what it could mean, because the whole role could be different, 3 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, I think the skills that are important to me as a business owner, I think about my own experience going through university, right? I couldn't tell you the facts or the information that I learned, about organizational change and management, or Smith's production or economies of diseconomies of scale, right? Some of that theoretical stuff. But what it did teach me is how to write, how to think critically. And I think also a bit of work ethic.
Totally.
Around this is a deadline, and this is I'm being rated or graded on my delivery of this project or what have you. So I guess it's just the skills I think that I'm looking for as an employer are fundamentally are really based around that. Is how do you communicate? Do you have the right attitude and work ethic? Are you keen and eager and understand initiative? And are you actually able to think critically?
Yes.
I think that critical thinking piece is a little bit it's hard to come by.
It might be getting harder.
And it is getting harder. I'm finding that even in myself, I reflect when I'm using some of these tools. My critical thinking extends only to, is that the outcome or the output that I was looking for or not?
Totally.
And so
same for me.
Using it as a thought partner versus actually doing the work.
Totally.
So I think that skill's actually going to get it's going to diminish over time.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I'm a little bit more worried about, right? And everything that you said, I agree with. I think the foundational skills, when you're in college and you're learning all of that, fantastic. Doesn't really matter what discipline you go into. My point was more around which disciplines might be more affected by AI. I think the fundamental skills are going to be applicable kind of whatever you do, which is great. I do worry about the critical thinking piece. It's too easy and too accessible to just defer all that critical thinking to AI wholesale. You know what I mean? I don't know what's happening in the school systems today. I know that there's, challenges with folks just over leveraging AI to write papers or what have you, right? So I'm really curious to see how that impacts, the younger generations. I have a younger daughter too, and that's something I've been thinking about, which is how do we separate that where we can still teach that fundamental skill while also, being open to using AI as a tool to further kind of like strengthen that fundamental skill, right? As opposed to just relying on it all the way through. Because, after school, what happens?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It's that term I think I've heard on a different podcast is just a brain rot, right?
Right.
Cognitive decline. That,
totally.
we might expect to see.
And I catch myself doing it too, where it's just so easy. It's like, just write me this email. I don't really want to think about it. You know what I mean?
100%. Oh gosh, it's our clutch. It's Claudia. It's a personality now.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. I think too, like just something that's exciting to me, and this is really kind of switching gears here, but the opportunities that sort of are coming up with a lot of our the older generation, we'll call it, folks that are sort of timing out of their businesses or looking to retire. There are a lot of boomers that have successful businesses, but they might not necessarily have been. They may be getting used to a certain way of doing things, and I think there's going to be a massive wave of folks looking for their exit plan, right?
Right.
But you've also got the scenario where young folks coming through the ranks might not necessarily have the access to capital. So I'm thinking with this particular example, business owners that might be looking to sell or piecemeal their business through ESOP programs or some sort of employee ownership model where they're slowly kind of making themselves or removing themselves from the business.
Like vendor financing and stuff like that. Yeah, right.
But, a lot of the young folks, they can't afford a house. So getting them to or having a strategy around how they might actually be able to buy into business is probably a little bit challenging. I think a lot of folks that are looking to exit their business are probably going to struggle to find the folks that have the capital necessary to take over from them.
Totally.
But that's a big opportunity out there right now. I think for a lot of people entering their careers, there's this sort of fascination when you think of the term entrepreneurship, that it has to be new or novel, your idea, that it has to be something that's that you're sort of willing into existence, and it's a product, or it's something that you build a business plan around, and it's you're sort of imagineering this product or goods or service, whatever.
Yeah.
I think of it in a very different way, particularly with what we're seeing with business owners or boomers that are looking to exit their business. I think there's a real opportunity for young people to look at some of these boring businesses, and in tandem with that conversation we're having about the skills that they need to be able to find and evaluate these opportunities,
right?
And modernize them, bring them into the 21st century.
Yep.
So I think that's a really exciting prospect for folks to start thinking about, is not starting something new or net or novel.
Totally.
It's how can you actually take a boring business or something that's not sexy, like cleaning, and make it sexy by putting your flair on it or something.
100%.
Yeah.
Have you talked to a lot of business owners that are kind of at that stage where they're thinking about, how much longer I got doing this and what the succession plan is? Like, I'm curious to get kind of like the anecdotal.
I really haven't seen many folks do this successfully.
The exit side or the acquisition
exit side.
Okay.
I've by and large, the businesses that I've had some sort of interaction, whether I'm a user of their services or someone has worked in that business, a lot of what I'm seeing today is that there's a sort of perpetual 5-year plan, right? It never clocks down to 4 years or 3 years or 2 years.
Refresh.
It's perpetual 5-year plan to exit a business.
Yeah.
And what I'm seeing with a lot of business owners that are in that mindset is that really don't have a plan.
Right.
It's this 5 years, and it's far enough into the future that they haven't actually thought about all of the steps that they need to get their business ready for that sale event.
Right.
And what ends up happening is they get tired. It's same old. They maybe put a little bit too much trust in the folks that are working in their business, and they sort of check out or time out.
Right.
And then their business, if it's not on strong foundation, starts to rock a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an upset that happens, COVID, for example.
Totally.
And the resilience is not baked into the business, and then they're finding that they have to or in a position where their asset or their business is not as valuable as it once was because they've kind of taken their foot off the gas.
Right.
So I've actually seen the really negative side of not being organized and not having a plan around exiting your business.
Got it.
Where businesses are having to dissolve.
Close shop, right?
Close shop. And I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's your life's work is your legacy, is your business.
Totally.
Then, to see that, not that torch not be passed on and instead fold. I think that's really quite a sad thing.
100%. I wonder how much of it too, and I don't know too much about this, but how much of just the marketplace aspect of it, right? Like finding a buyer and these buyers knowing how to find these businesses, right? I know that there's some websites online that do this, but I don't know how established they are. I don't know how much due diligence, like I don't know if folks that want to buy know how to do the due diligence, right? Or get in contact with these folks, right? To even start the conversation in the first place. So it's really interesting because even myself, I've thought about, what if, right? That's an avenue that I could take as well in the future. I'd be open to it. I know I have friends anecdotally who would be open to that. And it's come down to, well, how do we find, these businesses, right? If I don't have that network, right? Or I don't have that connection at the bank who brokers the deals or what have you, right?
100%. I think it's capital too. It's getting the money to be able to take that step.
Right.
So folks that are thinking about contributing to an RESP for their child, for example, to get an education savings plan, maybe that money would be better used actually buying a business and partnering with your children on buying a business so that they can maybe learn that way if they have an interest in that area.
Exactly. Yeah. Interesting to think about. But I do think folks would have a lot of like really high leverage if they were able to, one, have access to the capital, two, be able to find in a network a business or two that they would look to acquire, and they are, tech focused and are, thinking about these things, because then they can apply all of that, really, optimize what's there. And I think they'll be really successful, right? I've heard also that a lot of PE firms are doing these roll-ups where they're buying all of these businesses and they have access to capital and they have access to, folks that broker these deals, and they're able to just come in and buy a bunch of these businesses, right? Similar, slightly adjacent, and kind of roll them up into these much larger operations.
I'm seeing that a lot personally.
Yeah.
So I probably get, 2 or 3 either LinkedIn reach outs or what have you, of private equity looking to buy a business in our space, in the service space, because I think it represents something that's easy to replicate and, fairly process driven.
Right.
Type cash flow style businesses.
Right.
But I think what we have here in the Valley is something that everybody wants, which is a little slice of paradise too, right? So I think there's a lot of these larger companies that are looking at players in the Okanagan where they could, potentially just acquire a business so that the fat cats in Toronto can come out to their lake house and holiday here maybe and call that a write-off.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But, who knows what's in the future, but you see that with a lot of these franchise systems, is the systems eventually buy back their locations and they keep some of their bigger operators, but they kind of take more of a multi-unit approach where they become almost mini franchisors in and of themselves.
Right.
But you see that sort of consolidation happening both through private equity and franchise systems as well. They sort of buy back units or take more of a multi-unit approach.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Because you're in that position where you can make those decisions, right? And then you're kind of, especially in the franchising model, you've tested it, right? You can see what's working, what's not, and you have access to the data, right? Which is so valuable. Makes perfect sense that a lot of franchisors are doing that.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
Folks that want to get in touch with Perry at Abstract Digital, how can they reach you?
So you can go to abstractdigital.ai, drop me a note there, or you can add me on LinkedIn. That's what I check the most. My username is just my name. So Perry Hoffman.
Unreal. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Kristian.
It's
a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Cool.